Now we're going to move on to the final three pre-Socratic philosophers that we had discussed: Democritus, Anaxagoras, and Protagoras. And remember, when I was lecturing to you guys on this, I mentioned that all of these people did not know how to refute Parmenides' claim. And then when Zeno came along, it made it even more difficult. They were really very impressed by both Parmenides and by Zeno, and had no idea how they could possibly prove Zeno or Parmenides wrong, and they were all very impressed with what they had to say. So they had to figure out some way where they could maintain their position without claiming that change is possible. And that's where Democritus really comes from, because he has a position on metaphysics, on ontology. And his concept is, and this is the way I put it down, and so you go in the cell of metaphysics, everything in the world is made of very small particles of matter which are indivisible. That's where the word atom comes from a similar word in Greek. Matter can't be destroyed or created, so this is where he agrees with Parmenides. It always existed. Kind of a position on cosmology there. Change is just reconfiguration of the atom. So it's not that something goes out of existence and comes into existence, which was the problem for Parmenides, but rather it's reconfiguring the atoms in a different way. Interesting view. Okay. Anaxagoras comes along. Anaxagoras really takes a position on cosmology, at least what we're talking about. And I'm trying to focus in on the views that really heavily influenced Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle, the things that they thought were right and were wrong in answering problems. But Anaxagoras, and this again makes a claim about metaphysics, in particular about cosmology. That is, the question is, where did the world come from? And none of the explanations so far had a point. He said, mine is the force that was the first cause that brought the cosmos into existence. That is, it was mind, it was mental capability. The world was created for a purpose, like the contemporary claims of intelligent design. However, of course, I know it may be a shortcoming. What the creative mental force was that got everything going was just sort of a vortex, some kind of circular motion that got the cosmos moving. So those were their solutions. That was the way they dealt with Parmenides. And along come the Sophists. In particular, we're talking about Protagoras. And he comes up with what can be taken to be, and I think it's a view about metaphysics, because he says what's true, that is, the quote is, man is the measure of all things. That is, whatever a person sees or believes, that's right. But the implication of metaphysics is that whatever a man perceives, whatever he believes to be true, is true for him. That's just what truth is. So what Parmenides said was true for him. Protagoras doesn't think it's right. It's not true for Protagoras. Now notice, with regard to the epistemology column, I mean, that's really a view that they take on epistemology. It's also metaphysics, that is, we get this relativism, but it's also that, perception or observation is the source of all knowledge. Knowledge is relative to each person. View on epistemology. That is, we get the relativism. And the interesting thing is, while the Sophists really were not philosophers, but they were really just what we call itinerant teachers that went from place to place, and they found very wealthy people who were willing to pay them large sums of money to teach rhetoric, to teach people how to persuade people, not rationally, but how to use their emotions to persuade them. And so far, maybe you think, gee, this is right, this sounds pretty good. It's just what everybody's entitled to their own opinion, whatever they believe is true. And it might work in metaphysics and epistemology, but remember, in ethics, political philosophy, the same thing has to be true. So his view there is whatever a person believes is right for that person. That's why it's important to be taught rhetoric, so that you convince people to take your side. It's in this way that you gain the power to get what you want. So what's right or wrong is whatever right or wrong, whatever you believe to be right or wrong. Okay, so what I tried to do is briefly summarize, and that is in my answers, briefly summarize what we went over. That's probably what you guys, that it's not probably, that is what you should have done, and your summary could be a little different. Remember, I told you the important thing is to sit down and try to write this to yourself. Even if you haven't, even if you, this is what you saw first, you just looked at the document, sit down and try to write these yourselves. This is the only way that you learn this, is by actually getting engaged with it, doing something. Try to convince yourself it's right or it's wrong, and usually you want to try to convince yourself it's wrong.